The summer of 1914. Europe held its breath. On the banks of the Dniester, a battle was unfolding that was destined to change the course of history. This river, which had divided empires for centuries, became the arena for the clash of three powerful forces: the Russian war machine, the Austro-Hungarian coalition, and Polish formations striving for independence. Each side saw its path to the future in this battle. For Russia, control over the Dniester opened the way into the heart of Europe and strengthened its position in the Slavic world. Austria-Hungary, feeling the threat to its multinational empire, desperately defended its eastern borders. Polish units, fighting under different flags, sought in this battle a chance for the revival of statehood. The maneuvers of the troops were closely watched in Berlin, Paris, and London. The great powers understood: whoever controls the Dniester controls Eastern Europe. The outcome of the battle determined not just a new front line, it changed the geopolitical map of the continent. The Dniester River, stretching 1,366 kilometers from the Carpathian Mountains to the Black Sea, has always played a special role in the military history of Eastern Europe. Its winding course, steep banks, and numerous tributaries created a natural defensive line that has been used by armies of various eras for centuries. In the early 20th century, the strategic importance of this waterway only increased. The Dniester divided the Russian Empire and the Habsburg dominions, becoming a borderline between two military-political blocs. The landscape features gave the river unique military significance. The right bank, belonging to Austria-Hungary, rose above the left, Russian bank, creating a tactical advantage for the defending Austrian troops. Numerous rocky sections and canyons, especially in the middle course, made forcing the river extremely difficult for attacking units. At the same time, in its lower course, the Dniester widened, forming swampy floodplains that became impassable during spring floods and autumn rains. Military strategists of all belligerent parties carefully studied the experience of previous campaigns in this region. As early as the 18th century, the Russo-Turkish Wars showed that control over the Dniester crossings often determined the outcome of entire campaigns. In the Napoleonic era, French marshals and Russian generals left detailed memoirs about the difficulties of maneuvering in this region. Of particular value were the notes of participants in the Crimean campaign, when the river became an important transport artery for supplying troops. For the Russian Empire, the Dniester was not just a border river, but also a crucial element of the defensive system in the southwestern direction. Engineers of the Russian army created a chain of fortifications along the left bank, turning individual sections into veritable fortresses. The Austro-Hungarian command, in turn, viewed the river as an advanced line of defense for Galicia and Bukovina, vital provinces of the Habsburg Empire. The transport significance of the Dniester also cannot be underestimated. The river ports of Soroka, Mohyliv-Podilsky, and Bender connected the interior regions with the Black Sea, ensuring the delivery of food and ammunition. Railway bridges across the river were strategic objects for which fierce battles unfolded. Control over them opened up opportunities for rapid troop movement and supply. The climatic features of the region also influenced the planning of military operations. Summer heat and winter frosts, spring floods and autumn mud. All of this was taken into account by headquarters when developing offensive and defensive actions. Experience showed that the most favorable periods for major operations were late spring and early summer, when the water level in the river stabilized and the roads dried out after spring rains. By the summer of 1914, impressive military forces were concentrated on the banks of the Dniester. Each of the three armies possessed its unique advantages and disadvantages, which were to be tested in the crucible of battle. The Russian Imperial Army deployed 4 army corps to the Dniester line, totaling about 250,000 bayonets and sabers. The core of the Russian forces was infantry, renowned for its endurance and steadfastness in defense. They were armed with the Mosin Nagant M1891 rifle, reliable but no longer the most modern weapon. The artillery park included both outdated field guns and the latest howitzers, capable of indirect fire over river obstacles. The weak point of the Russian army remained logistics. Stretched communications and an insufficient number of railway branches complicated troop supply. The morale of the soldiers was high. Recent victories in the Manchurian campaign and Balkan conflicts had created an atmosphere of confidence. The Russian troops were commanded by General Brusilov, a talented cavalryman and tactician known for his unconventional thinking. The Austro-Hungarian army opposed the Russian forces with 3 corps, numbering about 200,000 men. Its main trump card was superior artillery, including heavy Skoda mortars, capable of destroying field fortifications from a safe distance. The infantry was armed with modern Mannlicher magazine rifles, providing a high rate of fire. The cavalry, especially the Hungarian hussar regiments, was considered one of the best in Europe. However, the multinational composition of the army created serious problems. German and Hungarian officers commanded soldiers who spoke Czech, Slovak, Romanian, and other languages of the empire. This hindered the interaction of units in battle and reduced overall effectiveness. The front commander, General Konrad von Hötzendorf, was a brilliant theoretician, but his strategic concepts often proved too complex for practical implementation. Polish formations, operating as part of both armies, represented a special factor. In the Russian army, these were regular units with Polish personnel. In the Austrian, specially created legions under the command of Józef Pilsudski. The total strength of the Polish forces reached 60,000 men. They were distinguished by high motivation. Many soldiers saw in this war a chance for the restoration of Polish independence. Tactically, Polish units specialized in reconnaissance and raiding operations behind enemy lines. The technical equipment of all armies reflected a paraful months before the battle. The general staffs of all sides worked on plans for the upcoming campaign. Each army pursued its own strategic goals, determined not only by military necessity but also by the political ambitions of governments. The Russian command, led by General Brusilov, developed a plan for a deep breakthrough of Austrian positions. The main idea was to force the Dniester on a wide front, followed by developing the offensive in the direction of Lviv. The Russian General Staff expected to use numerical superiority to create a powerful strike force. Special attention was paid to artillery preparation. Hundreds of guns were to suppress enemy firing points before the crossing began. Brusilov insisted on an unconventional solution. Instead of concentrating forces in one sector, he proposed delivering several simultaneous blows to disperse enemy reserves. This approach caused controversy within the staff, but was ultimately adopted. The Austro-Hungarian plan, developed by Konrad von Hötzendorf, was based on the principle of active defense. Understanding the impossibility of holding back the Russian offensive solely by defensive actions, the Austrians prepared powerful counterattacks on the flanks of the breakthrough units. A key element of the plan was a system of echeloned defense, relying on pre-prepared fortifications. A special role was assigned to heavy artillery, which was to strike concentrations of Russian troops on the left bank. Hötzendorf relied on the maneuverability of his formations and the better training of his officers. He expected to wear down Russian troops in defensive battles and then launch a decisive counter-offensive. Polish formations, under the command of Pilsudski, operating as part of the Austrian army, had their own special plan. Formally subordinate to the Austrian command, Pilsudski pursued far-reaching political goals. His strategy involved active operations in the northern sector of the front, where Polish legionaries could demonstrate their combat qualities and assert Polish national interests. Tactically, Polish units specialized in reconnaissance and sabotage operations, and raids behind enemy lines. Pilsudski understood that the future of the Polish question at the post-war peace conference depended on the success of his legions. The problem of forcing the Dniester attracted the special attention of all staffs. Russian engineering units prepared dozens of pontoon bridges and ferry crossings. The Austrians, in turn, developed a detailed plan for destroying bridges and flooding low-lying areas by blowing up dams. Both sides actively used aerial reconnaissance to identify enemy preparatory work. The interaction of different branches of the armed forces, infantry, artillery, cavalry, was meticulously planned. Each army sought to maximize its strengths and neutralize enemy advantages. The dawn of July 23rd painted the waters of the Dniester a blood-red color. The silence that had hung over the river for the past few days was shattered by the thunder of artillery salvos. The first Russian shells fell on Austrian positions exactly at 4 o'clock in the morning. An artillery duel began, heralding a large-scale battle. The advance units of the 8th Russian Corps, under the command of General Radko Dmitriev, were the first to reach the riverbank in the area of Zalishchiki. Reconnaissance groups of Don Cossacks had discovered a relatively weakly defended section of the Austrian defenses the day before. Taking advantage of the morning fog, sapper units quickly laid pontoon bridges. The first wave of attackers, 2 battalions of the Aachen-Gloggerod Infantry Regiment, crossed to the opposite bank with virtually no losses. However, within half an hour, the Austrian command redeployed a reserve hussar regiment and a battery of field howitzers to the breakthrough point. A fierce battle for the bridgehead ensued. At the same time, in the southern sector of the front, Pilsudski's Polish legionaries undertook a daring sortie into the rear of Russian positions. 3 cavalry squadrons forded the Dniester in the area of Kotin, where the river makes a sharp bend, and attacked the artillery positions of the Russian army. The sudden raid sowed panic among the artillerymen. Several guns were put out of action. The Russian command immediately reacted to this threat by sending the Chernigov Dragoon Regiment to the breakthrough point. The cavalry skirmish in the riverside thickets was particularly brutal. Both sides understood the strategic importance of this section. By noon, the situation on the front had become chaotic. In the central sector, the Austrians successfully repelled Russian attempts to cross the river near Nizhnev, inflicting significant losses on the attackers. Heavy Škoda mortars methodically destroyed Russian crossings, barely allowing sappers time to set them up. However, on the northern flank, the Russians managed to gain a foothold on the right bank and expand the bridgehead to 3 kilometers deep and 5 along the river. The commander of the Austrian sector, General von Koves, requested reinforcements, but Hötzendorf, true to his strategy, decided to wait, allowing the Russians to be drawn into the battle. By the evening of the first day of the battle, both sides had suffered significant losses. The Russian army lost about 3,000 men killed and wounded, the Austrians slightly less. The Polish units, operating autonomously, lost about 400 legionaries. The night that followed brought no calm. Under the light of searchlights and flares, skirmishes continued. Russian sappers frantically fortified the captured bridgeheads, while Austrian engineering units mined probable directions for further advances. At dawn on the second day, the battle raged with renewed force. The Russian command, encouraged by the success in the northern sector, threw fresh reserves into battle. 2 regiments of Siberian riflemen. Known for their resilience and marksmanship, the Siberians quickly expanded their control zone, occupying key heights on the right bank. The third day of the battle became a turning point. The Austrian command, realizing the scale of the Russian breakthrough, began a large-scale regrouping of forces. 3 infantry regiments and an artillery brigade were urgently transferred from the southern flank. At the same time, General von Hotzendorf ordered a counteroffensive by the forces of the Reserve Corps, which until then had remained in the rear. At dawn on July 25th, Austrian troops fell upon the Russian bridgeheads. The combination of artillery fire and swift attacks by Hungarian infantry yielded results. By noon, the Russians had been driven back from the crossings near Zalishchiki. The pontoon bridges, built by sappers, were destroyed by accurate hits from heavy mortars. General Brusilov, who was observing the course of the battle from the command post on Hill 122, made an unconventional decision. Instead of committing all forces to holding the northern bridgehead, he ordered a new crossing in the central sector, near Nizhnev. The maneuver proved unexpected for the Austrians. The main reserves had already been engaged in the north. By the end of the day, Russian rifle divisions had entrenched themselves on the right bank of the Dniester in a new location, threatening to cut the Austrian front. The situation was becoming critical for the Habsburg army, but at this moment, a new factor entered the battle. Polish legions under the command of Pilsudski carried out a daring maneuver, outflanking Russian positions. Operating in small mobile groups, the legionaries attacked the rear communications of the Russian troops, disrupting the supply of forward units. Several convoys with ammunition and provisions were captured or destroyed. The 4th and 5th days of the battle turned into a real seesaw. The front line fluctuated, shifting first one way, then the other. Russian troops, using their numerical superiority, methodically expanded their bridgeheads. The Austrians responded with pinpoint counterattacks, seeking to dislodge the enemy from the most important heights. Particularly fierce fighting unfolded for Hill 206, a strategic point that controlled the approaches to the Dniester for 10 kilometers. In 2 days, this height changed hands 4 times. The slopes of the hill were literally blackened with craters and strewn with the bodies of fallen soldiers from both armies. By the end of the week, the battle reached its climax. The Russian army controlled 3 bridgeheads on the right bank with a total area of about 40 square kilometers. The Austrians held key heights and transport hubs deep within their defenses. Polish units operated in the gaps between the main forces, delivering unexpected blows and disappearing before the enemy could organize a pursuit. On August 8th, the situation changed again. The Austrian command, having received reinforcements from the empire's interior, launched a large-scale counteroffensive. 2 fresh divisions, transferred from Tyrol, struck the flank of the northern Russian bridgehead. Simultaneously, heavy artillery opened hurricane fire on the crossings. With each passing day, the battle on the Dniester exacted an increasingly terrible toll. By the end of the first week of fighting, losses numbered in the tens of thousands on both sides. The Russian army lost approximately 25,000 men killed and wounded. The price paid for 3 small bridgeheads on the right bank. Austro-Hungarian forces were short 22,000 soldiers and officers. The Polish legions, despite their small numbers, lost almost a quarter of their personnel. Losses in the officer corps proved particularly heavy. Russian regiments lost up to a third of their command staff. Young ensigns and lieutenants, leading soldiers into attack, were the first to fall under the fire of Austrian machine guns. In the Austrian army, the situation was only slightly better. Regular officers, forming the backbone of the Imperial Army, perished trying to halt the Russian offensive. Material losses also reached alarming proportions. Dozens of artillery pieces, Hundreds of machine guns, thousands of rifles remained on the battlefields. Russian quartermaster services struggled to replenish ammunition. Railways operated at their limit. The morale of the troops changed as the battle dragged on. In the first days, soldiers of all armies demonstrated high fighting spirit. Russian infantry went into attack with the traditional "Hurrah!" Austrian units steadfastly held their positions. However, by the end of the second week of fighting, the situation had changed. Commanders' reports increasingly contained alarming notes. Fatigue and apathy seized the soldiers. In Russian units, cases of self-inflicted wounds began. Soldiers, exhausted by continuous fighting, inflicted minor injuries upon themselves to leave the front line. The Austrian command faced an even more serious problem. Cases of desertion among Czech and Slovak units became more frequent. Only Polish legionaries maintained high morale, fueled by the national idea. The command of both sides was forced to adjust tactical plans in view of the growing losses. General Brusilov abandoned the idea of a frontal breakthrough, which demanded unjustifiable sacrifices. Instead, he opted for the gradual expansion of bridgeheads and the attrition of the enemy. The Austrian staff also shifted to more cautious tactics, conserving human resources. The impact of the losses was also felt in the rear. In Petrograd, the first lists of killed and wounded caused shock. The battle on the Dniester was the first major engagement in which Russia suffered such heavy losses. In Vienna and Budapest, the government tried to conceal the true extent of the catastrophe. But rumors spread faster than official reports. A particularly painful topic was the missing in action. Thousands of soldiers were listed in this category. Many were buried under the rubble of fortifications, carried away by the Dniester's current, or remained in no man's land, inaccessible due to incessant fire. The families of these soldiers found themselves in agonizing uncertainty, unable to mourn the dead or hope for their return. The Russian army, faced with the necessity of waging a large-scale battle on the Dniester, underwent a severe test of its mobilization system. The battle became a true examination for the empire's logistical machine, which had been preparing for a major European war for decades. The results of this inspection were mixed. On the one hand, Russia demonstrated an impressive ability to mobilize enormous human resources in the shortest possible time. Within 2 weeks, over 100,000 reservists were transferred to the combat zone, which allowed for the replenishment of heavy losses from the first days of the battle. Mobilization points in the Kiev, Odessa, and Kharkov military districts operated around the clock, processing thousands of conscripts daily. Railways in the southwestern direction functioned at their limit. Every 2 hours, a train with reinforcements arrived at the front. However, the scale of the operation also revealed significant shortcomings in the Russian mobilization system. First and foremost, a shortage of trained officers became apparent. While the rank and file were replenished quickly, there was a catastrophic lack of platoon and company commanders. Regular officers died in the front lines of the attackers, and their places were taken by yesterday's reserve ensigns, school teachers, zemstvo doctors, officials who had minimal military training. This immediately affected the effectiveness of combat operations. Inexperienced commanders made tactical errors that cost the lives of dozens of soldiers. The supply of the active army also faced serious difficulties. While ammunition and shells reached the front lines more or less regularly, there were interruptions in the supply of food and medicine. The quartermaster services, accustomed to the unhurried bureaucratic rhythm of peacetime, struggled to adapt to the conditions of a large-scale battle. The issue of evacuating the wounded was particularly acute. Field hospitals, deployed along the left bank of the Dniester, were overcrowded by the third day of the battle. Medical trains could not cope with the flow of casualties, and many wounded awaited transport to rear hospitals for several days. This led to high mortality from wounds that, under other circumstances, would not have been fatal. The technical equipment of arriving reserves also raised questions. While regular units had modern weaponry, reservists often received outdated Berdan rifles, and some marching companies arrived at the front completely unarmed, receiving rifles from fallen comrades. The Russian command learned important lessons from this experience. General Brusilov, in his report to the Emperor, specifically noted the necessity of creating strategic reserves of weaponry and ammunition directly in the front-line zone. The Chief of the General Staff, General Yanushkevich, initiated a reform of the system for training reserve officers, proposing to increase training periods and strengthen the practical component. The Ministry of War developed a new scheme for evacuating the wounded, providing for the creation of intermediate sorting points between field hospitals and rear medical facilities. The Battle of the Dniester proved that the Russian mobilization system, despite the identified shortcomings, generally coped with its task. The Empire demonstrated its ability to sustain large-scale combat operations for a long time, replenish losses, and provide troops with everything necessary. This experience proved invaluable for future military campaigns, allowing the Russian command to eliminate identified problems and improve logistical mechanisms. The Polish army learned unique lessons from the battle on the Dniester, which subsequently formed the basis of its military doctrine. Pilsudski's legions, operating as part of Austro-Hungarian forces but maintaining autonomy in tactical decisions, demonstrated the effectiveness of maneuver warfare in a complex landscape. The main discovery for the Polish command was the concept of flying detachments, small mobile groups of 30 to 50 fighters capable of penetrating enemy rear, disrupting communications, and creating panic among supply train units. These detachments, consisting primarily of cavalrymen and light infantry, avoided direct clashes with large enemy forces, striking at vulnerable points. During the battles for Hill 206, 4 such detachments, under the command of Captain Riedz Śmigły, penetrated the Russian rear and destroyed an artillery park that provided fire support for advancing units. This operation allowed the Austrians to hold a key position with minimal losses. Another important innovation was the tactic of rolling fire. Polish machine gun crews operating in pairs provided continuous suppressive fire against the enemy. While one machine gun fired, the crew of the second changed position. Then the roles were reversed. This tactic allowed them to avoid precise targeting of firing points by Russian artillery and maintain maneuverability in defense. The Polish command paid special attention to intelligence. Legionnaires, many of whom were natives of border areas and knew the terrain well, created an effective network of observation posts and agent points in the Russian rear. Information about troop movements and ammunition supplies reached Pilsudski with minimal delay, allowing for prompt reactions to changes in the situation. This system became the prototype for future Polish military intelligence. The Dniester battle also revealed weaknesses in Polish formations, insufficient artillery support, and supply problems. The legions, lacking their own logistical services, were completely dependent on Austrian logistics, which often led to disruptions in the supply of ammunition and provisions. After the battle, Pilsudski insisted on creating an autonomous supply system for Polish units. In subsequent years, the Dniester experience was thoroughly studied and systematized in Polish military academies. The principles of maneuver warfare, reconnaissance and sabotage operations, and mobile defense formed the basis of the military doctrine of independent Poland. Officers who had gone through the school of Dniester battles formed the backbone of the Polish Army's command staff in the interwar period. Tactical developments, tested in battles with Russian units, were improved and adapted to the conditions of modern warfare. The experience of counteracting a numerically superior enemy proved particularly valuable, a situation in which the Polish army inevitably found itself having borders with two powerful neighbors. The Austro-Hungarian Empire brought a true ethnic kaleidoscope to the battlefields of the Dniester. Germans and Hungarians, Czechs and Slovaks, Poles and Ukrainians, Romanians and Croats fought under the single banner of the double-headed eagle. This multinational army was simultaneously both a strength and a weakness of the Habsburg monarchy. For years, the War Ministry in Vienna tried to create a single cohesive organism from this motley mosaic of peoples. The first days of the battle exposed the deep-seated problems of the Austro-Hungarian war machine. The language barrier became a real test for the command. Orders given in German had to be translated into a dozen other languages. In critical moments of battle, this delay could cost entire units their lives. There is a known case where a Czech battalion did not retreat in time due to a misunderstood order and came under devastating fire from Russian artillery. Officially, the Habsburg army had a rule requiring officers to know the language of the unit they commanded. In practice, however, many commanders limited themselves to a set of basic phrases. Hungarian hussars under the command of German-speaking officers often acted on their own initiative, which disrupted the overall plan of the operation. Ethnic contradictions also manifested themselves in the morale of the soldiers. While Hungarian and German units fought with high morale, Slavic units often showed indecisiveness in battles against their Slavic brothers from the Russian army. The command tried to solve this problem by transferring Czech and Slovak regiments to the Italian front and Tyrolean riflemen to the Eastern Front. General Konrad von Hötzendorf, understanding the vulnerability of a multinational army, developed a system of mixed reserves. In critical sectors of the front, composite units were deployed, comprising representatives of different nationalities under the command of the most experienced officers. This measure partially solved the problem of the unreliability of individual ethnic units. A special position was occupied by the Polish legions, formerly subordinate to the Austrian command, but in fact following Pilsudski's instructions. Their high combat effectiveness was explained by the national idea, the struggle for an independent Poland. The Austrian command valued the Polish units for reconnaissance and sabotage operations, but treated them with a certain wariness. During the Battle of the Dniester, Hötzendorf's staff undertook several innovative measures to improve coordination. Special translation groups were created at each large unit, ensuring the rapid transmission of orders. Field telephone stations were staffed with operators who spoke several languages of the empire. Despite all the difficulties, the Austro-Hungarian army demonstrated surprising resilience. In critical moments of the battle, national differences receded into the background in the face of common danger. Soldiers of different nations showed mutual assistance and brotherhood in arms, refuting pessimistic predictions about the inevitable collapse of the multinational army. In Berlin, the battle on the Dniester was followed with intense attention. The German General Staff, led by General Helmuth von Moltke the Younger, established a special observation post where all intelligence from the Eastern Theater of Operations was gathered. German liaison officers with the Austro-Hungarian army sent detailed daily reports, which were carefully analyzed by the best analysts of the Kaiser's army. For Germany, the battle on the Dniester was of particular interest. It was the first major clash between Russian and Austrian troops, allowing an assessment of the real combat capabilities of both sides. The Germans particularly closely studied the actions of their main ally, the Austro-Hungarian army. The first reports from the front caused serious concern in Berlin. Colonel Max Hoffmann, one of the leading specialists on the Eastern Front, noted in his analysis, "Austrian troops demonstrate unexpected weakness in defense. The multinational composition of the Habsburg army creates problems with coordination of actions. Slavic units show insufficient resilience against the Russian offensive." German analysts paid special attention to the problem of interaction between various ethnic units of the Austrian army. In a secret memorandum for Kaiser Wilhelm II, General von Moltke wrote, "The multinationality of the Austrian army, which Vienna considers its advantage, in fact becomes a source of serious problems. Orders given in German reach Czech, Slovak, or Romanian units with delay and distortions, which is critically important in modern combat." At the same time, the German staff also noted positive aspects in the actions of the Allies. The Austrian artillery received high praise, especially the heavy Skoda mortars, which effectively struck Russian crossings over the Dniester. German observers noted the skill of Austrian sappers, who promptly mined the directions of a probable Russian offensive. Separate attention was paid to the Polish legions under Pilsudski's command. Colonel Hoffmann emphasized in his report, "Polish units demonstrate surprising effectiveness in reconnaissance and sabotage operations. Their tactics of mobile groups operating in the Russian rear deserve careful study and possible application by our special units." While a bloody drama unfolded on the banks of the Dniester, in the offices of Paris and London, every movement of the warring armies was closely watched. For the Western powers, the battle was of exceptional interest. It provided a unique opportunity to assess the military potential of all participants without direct involvement in the conflict. The French General Staff established a special analytical bureau, exclusively dedicated to the Eastern European theater of operations. Daily, dozens of telegrams from military attachés and intelligence agents arrived at the headquarters on Rue Saint-Dominique. Colonel Grandmaison, who headed the Eastern European section of French intelligence, compiled detailed reports for the highest military command. In one of his memoranda, he noted, "The Russian army demonstrates an impressive ability to maneuver on a wide front, which refutes our previous notions of its sluggishness. Particularly noteworthy is the tactic of multiple simultaneous strikes, developed by General Brusilov." The British War Office showed no less interest in the events on the Dniester. The Admiralty dispatched several observers who, under the guise of neutral journalists, followed the course of the battle. Their dispatches, encrypted and smuggled through Romania, contained a detailed analysis of the tactical innovations of all sides. The British paid special attention to the Polish formations, whose maneuverable actions in the enemy's rear were of interest to the Empire's special units. Western analysts were unanimous in their high assessment of the flexible strategy demonstrated during the battle. French General Foch, the future supreme commander of the Allied forces, wrote in his diary, "The Battle of the Dniester proves that the era of static frontal battles is a thing of the past. The future belongs to maneuver warfare, where initiative and the ability to quickly regroup forces are more important than numerical superiority." In diplomatic circles, the battle on the Dniester sparked lively discussions. The French ambassador in Petrograd, Maurice Paléologue, in his dispatches to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, emphasized the strategic importance of rapprochement with Russia. The Russian army, despite the identified shortcomings, remains the most powerful land force in Europe. Its ability to tie down significant Austro-German forces on the Eastern Front is crucial for France's security. British diplomacy, traditionally more cautious in continental affairs, also re-evaluated its attitude towards Russia. Sir Edward Grey, the British Foreign Secretary, stated at a closed cabinet meeting, "The events on the Dniester convincingly prove that Russia is capable of effectively resisting the Central Powers. Our support, even if limited at this stage, can be decisive for the overall balance of power." The Battle of the Dniester became a true laboratory of military innovations, where opposing sides tested the latest technologies and tactical methods. Each day of the battle brought unexpected technical solutions that changed the course of the confrontation. For the first time in the Eastern European theater of war, aviation was used on such a massive scale. The Russian air fleet deployed about 40 Ilya Muromets-type airplanes, the world's first heavy bombers. These giants, designed by Sikorsky, could carry up to 400 kilograms of bombs and remain airborne for over 5 hours. The Austrians countered them with agile Albatros reconnaissance planes, which, while inferior in payload capacity, surpassed the Russian machines in speed and maneuverability. Aerial duels over the Dniester became the first experience of mass combat application of aviation in the region. Artillery played a special role in the battle. The Russian army, for the first time, applied the tactic of a rolling barrage, the sequential transfer of artillery fire deep into the enemy's defenses ahead of advancing infantry. Artillery General Nilov developed detailed correction tables for firing from concealed positions, which significantly increased firing accuracy. The Austrians responded by introducing mobile artillery groups, batteries capable of quickly changing positions and firing from temporary platforms. This tactic made it difficult for Russian artillery to suppress enemy strongpoints. A revolutionary innovation was the widespread use of field telephones for adjusting artillery fire. Special observers, advanced to forward positions, transmitted data on the results of shelling to the batteries, allowing for prompt adjustments. Russian signalmen laid over 200 kilometers of telephone cable along the front line, creating a unified fire control network. In engineering, both sides also demonstrated an innovative approach. Russian sappers used a new system of rapidly deployable pontoon bridges capable of supporting the weight of artillery pieces. Austrian engineers countered them with underwater mines with hydrostatic fuses, activated by water pressure when a pontoon passed over them. The use of camouflage deserves special mention. Russian units for the first time used camouflage nets, painted to match the terrain, to conceal artillery positions. The Austrians created dummy batteries that simulated gun flashes using pyrotechnics to divert enemy fire from real positions. Polish legionaries contributed to the development of night operations tactics. Specially trained assault groups, equipped with silent weapons, knives and garrots, infiltrated Russian positions and destroyed command posts and communication nodes. This tactic, dubbed silent hunting, caused panic among Russian rear units and forced the command to allocate significant forces to guard headquarters. The medical service also underwent revolutionary changes. Russian military doctors for the first time used mobile operating rooms, located in specially equipped vehicles. This allowed surgical care to be provided directly in the frontline zone, which significantly reduced mortality among seriously wounded soldiers. The Austrians introduced a system for sorting the wounded by severity, a concept that later became a standard in military field medicine. The Battle of Dniester not only changed the front line, it reshaped the entire geopolitical map of Central and Eastern Europe. The large-scale battle, in which the interests of several empires clashed, had far-reaching consequences extending beyond a purely military confrontation. First and foremost, the system of Allied relations was radically transformed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, having suffered heavy losses and demonstrated the vulnerability of its multinational army, became even more dependent on German patronage. In a secret dispatch to Emperor Franz Joseph, Chancellor Bethmann Hollweg directly stated, "Henceforth, the security of the eastern borders of the Habsburg monarchy is primarily a German concern." Such a wording effectively meant the establishment of direct control by Berlin over Vienna's eastern policy. For Russia, the consequences were mixed. On the one hand, Brusilov's army's successful actions strengthened the empire's prestige among the Slavic peoples of the Balkans. On the other hand, the identified problems with the mobilization system and troop supply required urgent solutions. Nicholas II, upon receiving a detailed report on the battle, ordered the creation of a special commission to reform army logistics. Particularly serious changes occurred in the Polish question. Pilsudski's legions, having demonstrated high combat effectiveness, transformed from a marginal formation into a real military political force. The Austrian and German governments were forced to reconsider their attitude towards the prospect of Polish statehood. A secret memorandum from the German Foreign Ministry noted, "The Polish factor is transforming from small change into a key element of Eastern European stability." Territorial claims, dormant before the battle, flared up with new force. The Russian Empire, relying on the success of its troops, increased pressure on Bukovina and Galicia. Austro-Hungary, seeking to compensate for potential territorial losses in the east, intensified its claims in the Balkans. Serbia and Montenegro found themselves under increased diplomatic pressure from Vienna. The configuration of military-political blocs also underwent significant changes. France and England, impressed by the resilience of the Russian army, intensified military technical cooperation with Petrograd. British military attaché Colonel Knox received instructions to expand the program for supplying artillery systems and ammunition. The French government sent a special military mission to Russia for an exchange of experience. The internal political consequences of the battle proved no less significant. In Russia, military successes temporarily muted growing social tension, but the enormous human losses caused a wave of criticism against the government. In the Austrian parliament, Czech and Slovak deputies openly spoke about the right of Slavic peoples to self-determination. The Hungarian political elite, concerned about the weakening of the empire, began secret consultations about a possible separate peace with the Entente. The economic consequences of the battle were also quite tangible. Control over the Dniester transport corridor opened up new opportunities for trade. At the same time, the destruction of industrial infrastructure in the combat zone led to serious disruptions in the supply of the civilian population. Food prices in border areas increased by 1.5 to 2 times, which intensified social tension. For the future of Europe, the Battle of Dniester became a turning point. It demonstrated that the era of empires was coming to an end, and they were being replaced by nation-states ready to defend their interests with weapons in hand. The Polish example proved contagious. Soon, Czechs, Slovaks, Ukrainians, and other peoples who had lived for centuries under the rule of multinational empires asserted their rights. The lessons of the Dniester resonate through the decades, echoing the challenges of modern military science. That distant battle, fought on the banks of the winding river, became a kind of prophecy, anticipating many concepts of today's armed conflicts. The maneuver warfare demonstrated by the Polish legions is reflected in the modern doctrine of mobile strike groups. Pilsudski's tactics of flying detachments surprisingly resemble the actions of modern special operations forces, penetrating deep into enemy territory to perform pinpoint tasks. The experience of the Russian Empire's mobilization system is still relevant today. The problems with reserve coordination, supply, and medical evacuation, identified during the Dniester battle, force modern strategists to pay special attention to logistical support. The vulnerability of extended communications demonstrated in that battle is now compensated by the creation of autonomous combat groups with their own supplies and support means. The coalition strategy of the Austro-Hungarian army offers a particularly valuable lesson in an era of international military alliances. The problems of coordinating multinational forces, language barriers, and differences in military doctrines remain relevant challenges for modern coalitions. Hötzendorf's experience in creating mixed reserves and special coordination headquarters is reflected in the structure of modern international military missions. Technological innovations tested on the Dniester became precursors of modern military technologies. The tactic of the firewall transformed into the concept of fire support using high-precision weapons. Field telephones gave way to secure digital communication systems, but the principle of coordinating actions through reliable communication channels remained unchanged. The geopolitical lessons of the Dniester battle are particularly significant for modern Eastern Europe. The region remains a zone where the interests of great powers intersect. The striving of small nations for self-determination, manifested in the actions of the Polish legions, found its continuation in the formation of independent states after the collapse of empires. Modern military academies study the Dniester battle as a classic example of the influence of the geographical factor on strategy. Control over river crossings, dominant heights, and transport hubs remains a key element of success in local conflicts. The experience of forcing water obstacles under enemy fire remains relevant even in the era of drones and satellite reconnaissance. The psychological aspects of that battle have also not lost their significance. The morale of the troops, the influence of national ideas on combat effectiveness, the psychological impact of growing losses, all these factors continue to play a decisive role in modern conflicts, despite the technological revolution in military affairs. For Russia, the lessons of the Dniester are connected with the need to maintain a balance between the size of the armed forces and their qualitative equipment. Poland learned from that battle the understanding of the importance of maneuver defense when confronting a numerically superior enemy. For the countries of Central Europe, the experience of a multinational coalition became the basis of modern concepts of regional security. The battle on the Dniester reminds modern strategists that even in the age of high technology, the human factor remains decisive. The initiative of commanders, the interaction of different branches of service, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. These qualities are no less important today than a century ago on the banks of the river that divided empires.